Alright, so we're back on that FGO grind. We're gonna get into the chapter Orleans, or Orléans if you want to be specific, which kicks off in Orléans, France during the 100 Years' War. This is the first official singularity. Singularity F was just a part of the prologue, so that functions more like chapter 0. We switch over to France, and there's a summoning session being held consisting of Jalter back from Phase 0. As I mentioned before, we know that grails are being placed into each singularity, and the person that holds the grail has the power to alter certain events, Jill being the one that possessed the grail here. So if you remember his infatuation with Joan of Arc back in Phase 0, to the point where he thought Saber was Joan of Arc because she looked so much like her, Jill was a big supporter of Joan, and he really thought that they did her dirty. So in this situation, he decides to create his own ideal version of Joan using the power of the grail and making her an alter. And from this we get the birth of Joan of Arc Alter in the ruler class, Jalter for short. This version of Joan in particular, at least the singularity version, is merciless through and through. All she wants is revenge on France because, like Jill, she feels that they betrayed her. She wants everything devastated, every city, every town, any people that get in the way, they can get ran through too. And since she was created with the powers of the grail, she now has access to additional powers that are singularity specific. Immediately, like Medea, we find that she's able to summon her own version of fake servants that can fight at her side. This includes Dayon, Vlad the Impaler, Atalanta, Carmilla, and Saint Martha. And to spice things up even more, we find that she was able to apply the Berserker attribute to each one of these servants. If you remember the summoning of Lancelot in Phase 0, he was supposed to come out in his original class, and then Zokin came in and got to toying with his summoning and made him come out as a Berserker. This is kind of similar to that. She enhanced these characters to be a Berserker, making them lose their sanity, but it upped their power. The only difference is they were able to stay in their main classes. And going back to having her servants destroy everything, it's an interesting take for her because of the way that she rationalizes the situation. One of the main parts of Joan's original history is that she would hear words, messages from God that would help her overturn the war. So she herself was acting as a conduit of the Lord. So in Jalter's eyes, for them to turn around and execute her when she was working for God, they're the ones that are evil. So she's telling her servants that all the things that they do will be forgiven because they're the ones that are getting rid of the evil. So it's 3 days after the execution of the original Joan, and we find that they've taken the priest Pierre Calkin hostage. This is the same priest that ordered Joan to be executed in the first place. For Jalter, paying him back personally is essential. So now she's in there telling him, well, look how the tables have turned, Tubby. And he's just begging that she please spare him. Please spare me, I'll do anything. You hear that, Jill? He wants me to spare him. You didn't spare me when I was being trampled, tied up, burned alive, but now all of a sudden you feel like you deserve the same thing. How ironic. Let's see how far your paper thin faith gets you now. And then with the power of her phantasm, which allows for her to do this, she incinerates him. And to drive the point home, she mentions that instead of being burned by regular flames, she burned him with flames that were even hotter, flames that came from the deepest pits of hell. Not even his ashes were present when she was through with him. I think he got the message. What do you think, Jill? That was beautiful, Joan. Such a marvelous finish. And then he gets to asking her about the other church members that they've taken hostage. And she tells Jill that she can't be bothered with them, so they can just be used as food. And what she means by this is that she came with the authority over the mythical beings, wyverns. In other words, dragons. So she's telling Jill to feed the rest of the clergy to them. Anybody that manages to survive, the servants can just clean up the rest of the remains. So we switch back over to Chaldea, and Roman is briefing us on the current mission. And he's telling us that it's very important that we either take the grail or we destroy it, because even if we fix the singularity and we don't do that, the abnormalities will still exist. So the moment we get there, we need to make a summoning circle like before, so that way he can send supplies or anything else that we might need. Something else that we've gained access to is that now we can summon our own servants. The thing is, those servants will more than likely be tied to the land or the time that we're in. Hello, aren't you forgetting something? Oh yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I forgot you were standing there. Anyway guys, this is Da Vinci. She is, wait, what do you go by? You know what, screw it. Leonardo is the leader of the engineering department. There you go. And then MASH just starts to lose it. Wait, that can't be right. Leonardo is supposed to be a man. You know something, MASH? I like that about you. You're always supposed to ask questions. But honestly, who cares? These legs are gonna fund FGO for the next 15 years. I feel like I'm at my best when I'm my own work, which is the Mona Lisa. So that's what's going down. I'm Mona Lisa incarnate. And Roman's just in the back like, imagine being this infatuated with yourself. She also goes into the fact that she specifically is the one that keeps supplies on deck for us. She does research and development, and she's the one that writes up the data for the contracts that we create with our servants. She's the one that organizes this and puts that out. As of right now, she can't race shift like MASH because she would have to form a contract with Ritsuka, which is something that she hasn't done by this point in time. And one thing that Roman brings up before we leave is the fact that he picked the singularity that we went to. He picked the one with the smallest fluctuations. So it wasn't a matter of us being forced to go there. He just thought it would be the best idea. Yo, imagine instead of going in order, he just shot from the hip instead. Because the way the singularities go down, we needed that experience to physically and mentally prepare ourselves for the things that's about to come. If we just walked into Singularity 5 right now, the America chapter, it would be over with. So we shift over to the Singularity as planned, and again MASH tells us that this is in the middle of the 100 Years War, but it's supposed to be in a period of respite. So at the time, most people are holding back from the wars and they're kind of just chilling. And as she's explaining this, Ritsuka can't help but notice the thing that's behind her. They look up and they start to see a giant ring that covers the entire sky. Ritsuka's like, yo, it's a space donut. And Roman mentions that he's not sure what it is, but he guarantees that it's magecraft and it's a part of all the things that's going on right now. He also mentions that it's the same size as all of North America, which by the way is 9.5 million square miles. That can be good. So we're walking through the Singularity and we see a French soldier. So we decide to ask him for directions. The moment we do, he calls up all of his friends and they try to jump us. MASH is thinking, man, I knew I should have greeted him in French. Roman, do you know any French jokes? You know something, MASH? I'm actually not that good with jokes. Goodness, Roman, you're literally always useless. And then she says, I'm not really trying to hurt them, we need to keep the damage to a minimum. Roman tells her to just hit them with the back of her blade. Blade? She has a shield. Close enough. So we follow the soldiers into the nearby city and we're trying to figure out why it's been destroyed. Now there's a couple of things that are out of line here, which isn't too surprising considering who wrote it. And I don't mean that by the author, I mean somebody that's not versed in the background. This treaty that MASH is talking about, it doesn't happen for several years. It's the Treaty of Arras. It happens in 1435. But basically this treaty was supposed to squash a long-standing beef that the French had with the Burgundians. It was the treaty between King Charles VII, who was over the French, and Philip the Good, who was over the Burgundians. So up until 1435, the French are still at arms with the Burgundians. The Burgundians capture Joan and then they sell her off to the English, who were their allies at the time. The English rig up a trial and find her guilty on multiple accounts and they have her burned at the stake. The Burgundians did try to offer a ransom price before they lobbed her to the English, but Charles didn't want to pay it. Now there's different interpretation as to why he did this, but the general consensus is that he didn't like the idea of somebody like Joan, who was merely a peasant, rising to power, so he left her to the wolves. Now thanks to Jalter's rampage, they're saying that King Charles is dead altogether, so the treaty is never going to be signed, and the French are running amok trying to figure out what's going on. MASH then explains that because Joan led the French to victory in her background, she's viewed as a top-ranked heroic spirit. She was only 17 when she pulled this off. At this point, we find out another ability from Jalter, which is turning a corpse into a skeleton familiar. So on top of all the dragons flying around, people are starting to fight those too. Then we run into Joan of Arc ourselves. We find out that she was summoned by the world just a few hours ago, and despite all the things that happened to her, she was still defending the French the best she possibly could. She also has been placed in the ruler class. She mentions that there has been some abnormalities in her summoning. She's lost access to the anti-servant command spells that she had back in Apocrypha. She can only detect servants on a normal level. She can't reveal a person's true name anymore, and her stats have been ranked down from what they would be normally. She believes that a lot of this is from the fact that she's a brand new heroic spirit. She only died 3 days ago, so she practically can't utilize her background to its full potential because her legend is still being established. For now, they just gotta work with what she has. They run over to the nearest town, which is Sharite, and they find that everything has been destroyed. There's wyverns all over the place, the same skeletons that I mentioned before, and then the wyverns are also picking at the dead bodies that didn't change. Then Roman comes on the intercom. Yeah, there's about 5 people heading your way right now. You're joking, right? Nah, I'm pretty sure this is accurate. My advice? Book it. Then Jalter and her servants, each one having their own wyvern thanks to her, pull up and land right in front of us. Well, well, well. If it isn't my former self. Disgusting. This time around, I'll be saving this country by force. And then Roman tries to cut her off. Yeah, but isn't that like counterproductive? And the moment that he does this, she looks at the intercom and burns his console through the other side. Our intercom is ran through magical energy. Jalter was strong enough to hack into the other side and burn his console just by looking at him. And Roman is on the other side panicking. Whoa, 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 time out. She can do that? I don't know who that is, but he's annoying. Regardless of the fact, if you plan to interfere, I could care less. Now, my people, handle my lightweight. And then she sends out Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for the mythical Dracula, and Carmilla, the final result of Elizabeth Bathory, the same woman that was said to have tortured women and bathed in their blood. Here, both of them being coined as well-known bloodsuckers. The idea behind this was that Joan could summon somebody that was super bloodthirsty, but wouldn't take a lot for them to come out. However, something that Jalter finds out in the process is that since they're so bloodthirsty, that's the only thing that they think of. And instead of going all out against us like they're supposed to, they were fighting us with the intentions on holding back because they wanted to suck our blood. And then a new player enters the field. This is Marie, the OG Antoinette. And she tells Jalter and Joan, all of this is unnecessary. What really matters is me making your heart and your body mine. And Joan is like, what do you mean by that? At that point, another servant comes out, which is the homie Mozart, and he starts to cast his phantasm, Requiem for Death. And with them hearing this, it left Jalter and their team stunned. Marie follows this up by saying, sorry guys, show's over. And then we all dip. Jalter tried to retaliate with a blast of flame, only to realize that we were already gone. Once Jalter and her team came back to again, Jalter sent out Martha to go track us down by herself, and then she left the rest of her team to continue their destruction. Over on our side, we start to set up camp. We finally get that summoning circle established from before, and Mozart and Marie start to tell us that they were also summoned to the singularity by the world. Knowing of Joan, Marie starts to praise her for being a saint, but Joan doesn't really like that title because she feels like she was just doing what she was supposed to. And then Mozart chimes in and he tells Marie, sometimes you gotta respect people's wishes. The girl clearly doesn't want to be called that, just keep it real. And Marie said, you know what, Mozart? You're right. I'm gonna start by taking your advice right now. You piano brain piece of garbage. You can only get it up for musical scales. You shut your whore mouth. Joan is perfect, and I will talk to her the way that I talk to her. Thank you. Yeah. As a Mozart fan, we are down bad. And then Mozart tells her, ooh, I love it when you're mad. We talk a bit about the servant Dayon, and the reason being is because he served under Marie during his life. He was a spy as well as a soldier, and he would use his androgynous appearance to dip in and out of character. And then one day he woke up and decided to be Caitlyn Jenner. After a while, Martha finally was able to catch up with us, and it further revealed the flaws that were a part of Jalter's summoning. Like Vlad and Carmilla, Martha too had issues. Due to the madness enhancement and also being a saint, her mind would waver in and out of righteousness. So when she showed up, she made us fight her, and when we finally defeated her, she told us where to go, which was the city of Lyon. We get over to Lyon and we find that it's also been destroyed and filled with monsters. Marie tries to get some information out of the nearby refugees, and they tell her that there was a protector, a quote-unquote dragon slayer, that was helping them out, but he was overwhelmed by the numbers, and then he ended up going missing. We also find out that the same Jalter, the Jalter that fought alongside Joan and was never convicted of any atrocity, the one that's still alive in this era, he was nearby, and he was also trying to figure out how to address Lyon's destruction. Joan mentioning that she didn't want to see him in person because so many people have mistaken her for Jalter, wishing her death and calling her a witch, that she didn't want Jill to do the same thing because she had a lot of respect for him. The best we can do right now is just find this so-called dragon slayer. So Ritsuka says, let's get on it, we gotta go into the city. And Marie, being surprised by his bravery, just kisses Ritsuka out of nowhere. Naturally, this has Mash feeling away. Where did that come from? And Marie's kiss isn't just a normal kiss, it's actually a spell that's a part of her character. It's a hypnosis spell. So I'm dazed and Mash is trying to shake me out of it. Oh, don't think anything of that, we're French, we kiss everybody. Isn't that right, Joan? I have nothing to do with this. So we get into the city, and in the heart of it, we find that Jalter summoned even more servants. The first of which being the Phantom of the Opera. The moment that we take him down, Roman tells us that there's an ultra-sized life form coming this way, and then there's 3 servants coming behind it. In the meantime, we run off to the nearby castle and realize that the Dragon Slayer is Siegfried, and he's been trapped inside the castle fighting off countless wyverns while being incredibly wounded, though we still need his help, so we bring him out to the field anyway. At that point, Jalter pulls up again, but this time she has the dragon that was slain by Siegfried, Fafnir. Using both of their phantasms at the same time, Joan and Mash tried to hold back Fafnir, but it doesn't last long enough to make a real difference. Then Siegfried, despite having his condition, says that he's gonna take the dragon on regardless. He charges up his phantasm Balmung and lands a direct hit on Fafnir, causing Jalter to retreat and fly up into the air. She starts to realize how detrimental having Siegfried on our side could be and really wants her forces to take him out first. Using the time that Siegfried has now cleared for us, we try to make a run for it, and when we do, we run into the other servants that she summoned. This being Charles Sanson, an executioner, the same one that executed Marie, and the Knight of the Round Table, Lancelot. Marie, your neck is just as beautiful as I remember it. This is truly destiny. Who would have thought I'd get a chance to kill you for a second time around? Then Mozart tells him, you're excited to take her out again? Are you actually insane? What do you get out of this? I'm trying to get that head, bitch, that's what I'm trying to get. So we go off into this battle with Sanson and Lancelot, Mash pointing out the fact that Lancelot is scarier than any servant we've faced before. Things start to get worse. There is a countless amount of wyverns that are starting to attack us in the middle of the fight. Joan notices that these wyverns are also attacking the French soldiers nearby, so she decides to deviate and go out and help them. She saves many of the soldiers right in front of their eyes, and the only thing they did was call her a witch and hope that she died with the enemy anyway. At that point, Carmilla re-enters the mix. So how does it feel, Joan? The same people you so righteously protected are now running your name into the ground. And to that point, Joan responds, it's unfortunate, but she still has no ill will. This left Carmilla confused to the point where she thought Joan was mad. They go off into a one-on-one confrontation, and despite the fact of her being weakened, Joan still comes out on top. Carmilla mentioning that her physical strength as a ruler is just too great. Now that the odds are starting to lean more into our favor, they're starting to fall back, and Carmilla tells Lancelot to buy them some time. And once again, the story makes that same nod back to Fate Zero, where you have Lancelot being obsessed with Joan because she has a similar soul to King Arthur. We finally drive Lancelot off and we're able to catch a break. We start to take a better look at Siegfried's wound, and we find out that not only is he wounded, but it's a multi-layered curse. They could try to heal it, but it wouldn't be enough to nullify the pain. He explains that he ended up being jumped by Jalter's servants, but Martha came behind them and locked him in a castle, ultimately saving his life. That's when they come to the conclusion that they're gonna need another saint that can help remove all these curses at once. Roman tells us that the counterforce may have summoned this saint. Then it goes off into a section where it talks about the past of Mozart and Marie, and how Mozart proposed to Marie when he was only 6 years old, which is the reason why they already knew each other. She turned him down, but she still believes that he's one of the sweetest people she knows. We continue to move and Roman starts to get a reading on more servants, so we go in to check it out. We find Elizabeth Bathory, the younger version of Carmilla, and the mythical serpent Kiyohime standing in the middle arguing with each other, and then Mash tries to stop them. Okay guys, it's not that serious, let's all take a chill pill. They still keep arguing. Would you shut the hell up? Mozart agreeing, saying that this is defamation to sound in general. So in a matter of minutes of them being at each other's necks, they decide to team up with each other and go against us just to prove a point. Of course, this doesn't work out for them, and once we beat them, Kiyohime reveals the saint that we're looking for, that being Saint George. Joan, who had been split up with them at the time, locating George around the same moment. We're trying to get his help and he's focused on saving the civilians. So Marie says that she'll stay behind and protect them in his place, but he needs to hurry up and go. So we leave, and at that point, Jalter and Sanson pulls up. Jalter tries to mock Marie for even giving it a shot, saying that she's foolish for protecting the same country that had her executed. And much like Joan, Marie doesn't really take it to heart. She believes that her execution led to the greater good. Doesn't bother me, that's just a part of the game. She manages to drive Sanson off, but ends up not making it because of Jalter alongside her dragons. It was just too much. The news finally gets back around to Mozart, and he says that he's not surprised and he's not bothered. He knows how Marie is and he expected her to go out and do something like this. That being said, he told our group that he's gonna take the back seat until they need him again, everybody getting the signal that he was going to cry ferociously off screen because of her death. In a way, Ritsuka was in the same mental space. He lamented on the fact that he didn't establish a contract with Marie, because if he used a command spell, he might have been able to save her. So he decided to make a contract with Siegfried later in case he needed help. That way he didn't make the same mistake all over again. Later on that night, Mash decides to have a one-on-one with Mozart because she likes the way that he thinks and she believes that she has a lot that she can learn from him. This concerning a statement that he said in the story prior, saying that people choose what they love. Something that Mash can't really wrap her head around because her entire life she's been a recluse. So the way that she was taught, being righteous is the only right answer. And then he starts to ask her, okay, so what do you believe is right? She tells him ideals that's morally just, something that can save a lot of lives. And I just want to point out that this is some crazy foreshadowing for Goetia, and Mash eventually has to answer to this type of thinking later on in the story. Okay, you say you want morally just, but how morally just do you want it? Which she's gonna find out that life isn't just arbitrary ones and zeros. Looking back, Kirisugu was also morally just. He also saved a lot of lives. I'm positive she wouldn't rock with him at all. And of course, I mean his human form. And he tells her flat out that's a bad way to measure things. So then Mozart poses a question to her. Okay, in the event that Ritsuka turns evil and he does those things, then what are you gonna do? Are you still gonna support him? And she can't even really answer. And even he's shocked by how pure she truly is. So what he decides to leave her with is that she shouldn't think of the world so one-directional. You have to take everything in, the good and the bad. Things like evil and misfortune is necessary for us to progress. Otherwise, we just stay in the same place. Just find something that works for you and don't get carried away. And then he brags about her, saying that he appreciates her conversation wholeheartedly. They go back to camp and you have Mozart and Joan discussing the fall of Marie a little bit more. He says that Marie became a queen when she was only 14, so most of her life was sheltered anyway. The fact that she defended Joan so hard was pretty out of character, but he believes that he knows why. And the reason is that they both lived lives where they were alone, one person being alone at the top and then one person being being alone at the bottom, and because of this, a lot of times they may have been misunderstood, though I'm positive that she was satisfied with the outcome. Joan tells Mozart that he's a good comrade, and he tells her not to think of him that way because the feeling isn't mutual. I'm just a guy, my only affection is my music, and that's just the way I live. Personally, I believe people are trash, myself included. So the next day, we start to make preparations to go into the final battle. Roman says that he couldn't be any more prepared, he's got all of his energy drinks ready. At that point, Mash tells him, Roman, I don't think you should drink those. Yo, this dude is so hilarious. I love Roman so much. You're not even here. You're sitting at the computer. What do you even need energy for? So we make our way to the battle, and then we run into Atalanta, and then we kill her. That's it. That's her whole involvement in the story. Why do y'all keep doing my girl like this? Every time she's in the story, y'all do her like this. We pull up to the battlefield and we face off against Jalter and her remaining servants. This time around, they have every wyvern there that you can possibly think of in the middle of it. The main point here is us taking down Fafnir, which Siegfried is able to accomplish because Joan and St. George was able to lift his curse. Everybody was in shock at Joan's power when she was able to deflect direct hits from Fafnir just by using her flagpole, which was a key point in protecting us and securing the victory. Once we took Fafnir out the picture, all of the wyverns started to go crazy considering that their leader was gone. Now that everything's going haywire, Jalter and Jill decide to evacuate back to the castle in order to regroup. We also run into Sanson again, but this time he's lost his mind. Prior to Marie being defeated, she criticized Sanson for the way that he was moving. Back when he took her life the first time around, she respected him for it because he was only doing the model job of what he was assigned to do. Now that he's become obsessed with it, she's lost her respect and told him that he's nothing more than a rabid dog. This drastically affected the way that Sanson was looking at things. He begged for her forgiveness, but by that time it was already too late. This caused him to lose his mind and make his spirit drift into madness. Upon his one-on-one with Mozart, he starts to regain his sanity, remembering how close they were, but saying Mozart doesn't deserve her love and he's just going to take his revenge out on him. This led Mozart into once again casting his phantasm Requiem for Death, where he finally put Sanson out of his misery for good. And then you have Elizabeth facing off with her older counterpart self. Though her younger version is aware of how she turned out in the future, she denies the way that she is and doesn't want to be like her. Now the thing about Elizabeth is that she likes to sing. That's her phantasm. But unfortunately, she can't sing at all, and she perpetually sounds horrible. And just to give a more vivid picture, I would imagine it sounds like grinding steel beams into a turbine. With that being said, everybody wants her to stop. You have Siegfried, St. George, and Mozart begging Ritsuka to take Elizabeth with him. They can't take it anymore. We still love you, Liz, and she ends up coming out on top. Siegfried ended up running through Vlad with a hit from his Balmung. The last of them, and easily the most gruesome that we had to deal with, was Sir Lancelot. And boy, do I tell you, he lives up to the name. Nearly every troop from the French army was rallied to this battle, and Lancelot was straight up running through them all, gutting them, decapitating them in multiples, gouging them through the chest. He was relentless. Even with the combined powers of nearly all of our servants, we still couldn't hold him. It was at a point where St. George decided to use himself as a distraction, and he finally got the upper hand on Lancelot. Mozart was able to capture Lancelot in a binding spell, and ultimately we put him down. So we cut over to the castle, and we find that Jalter is planning to summon another servant. Jill even recommends that she summons King Arthur, but Jalter doesn't really believe that she can pull this off because he's English and probably won't answer her call. We get to the castle and end up going against Jill and his tentacle familiars who's trying to hold us off. Once we get him out the way, we finally run down on Jalter. Since she didn't have enough time, instead of summoning an actual servant, she just summoned a bunch of shadow servants from Fuyuki. We take down the servants, we take down Jalter, and then we have to to fight against Jill one last time. He begins to summon his giant monster, which literally starts to protrude from the castle and devastate everything that's around it. It was only by the combined forces of everybody that was present, everybody using their phantasms in unison, that we were able to finally take him down. Once Jill is defeated, he tells us that he really wanted to revive Joan from the bottom of his heart, but what happened was the Grail denied him, so he ended up having to make her all over again from scratch. He continues to explain that he hates the country, and Jalter's state of mind is something that really stems from him, how this version of him was portrayed and he was actually convicted of his atrocities. It was the only way he could get even. After that, we collect the Grail. Joan is excited to see that the sane Jill is still alive, saying that he would never turn his back on her and he always considered that there was a counterpart. We get back to Chaldea, and Madge can't help but think about the conversation that she had with Mozart. This was concerning Jill. She says that she has a hard time believing that a person like Saber Jill could ever turn into Castor Jill. So the story goes that Saber Jill used to serve as a general under France. He was respected, he was proper in his job, and then later on in his life he ran into Prelati, and Prelati got him into black magic, and he started to commit a bunch of atrocities among children that eventually got him executed. These days, a lot of people say that he may have been framed, that the other nobles really wanted his fortune, so they found a way to frame him and get him out of the picture. It's not really an uncommon trope at all. Me personally, I think he did that shit, I ain't gonna lie to you. I've always felt that way. Now, did he do it to the degree that everybody makes it out to? Probably not, but I do feel like he did it. And I also have an issue with people going back into history and turning evil people into heroes. If they're evil, let them be evil. Everybody's not gonna be a hero. Everybody might not finish their story as a hero. But like I always say, I wasn't there, so I don't know. And just in case people thought I forgot, we gotta give credit where credit is due. The most important figure in this chapter, a man who was there for us when nobody else was in the game, a man that lacked any anti-dragon attributes, just a sword and a dream. The man, the myth, the legend, Sasaki Kojiro, the true savior of friends. Respect his body.